In this tutorial, we'll recreate this video from Natt Jongsala.
Stop limiting ourselves. We have to prioritize, always. I call it a trifactor. I prioritize 3 things at a time. And then when I get those 3 done, I go to 3 other things. I get those 3 done, I go to 3 other things. That's what you have to do, but never limit yourself.
Natt recently started to create videos in a more motion graphic style, so I wanted to show you guys how you can also create such videos. Before we get into that, if you want to go from being an average editor, struggling to land high-paying clients, to becoming an advanced editor and animator who is able to work for top influencers, then make sure to join our Leverage Editor program and community, where we even recently posted a job offer. So by joining the community, not only will you learn styles like Danko, Iman Ghazi, Ali Abdal or Vox style, but you can also find a full-time job as an editor there. Without being in the community, you will be fighting and competing against literally thousands of editors out there trying to land clients. While in the community, we'll not only show you how to make your edits stand out, but we'll tell you exactly what to do to land those high-paying clients. We have a full module with 5 documents, each describing different aspects of client acquisition. To ensure that everyone who comes through finds success, we'll be limiting spots in the future, so the price might go up. So sign up now, link is in the description. And with that, let's get into the video. Okay, so in After Effects, obviously create a vertical composition so I can show you my settings. And you can just copy everything from there. Now here I have the original video that Natt created, and you will have that video in the asset folder in the description, as well as every other asset that I will be using throughout this video. And this will serve as our model layer so we can have a reference. So first we can create the background. So right click there, new, solid, and set the color of this background to the color from the original video. Let's hide the original video. And now we'll create a camera. So right click, new, camera, and keep the settings at default. And we do that because in this animation we'll actually need to use 3D. Exactly in this moment you can see that these points are rotating in 3D space, so that's what we need the camera for. Okay, and we'll start by creating the ball. So go up here to ellipse tool, and while holding shift, draw a perfect circle, kinda this size. Remove the stroke on this one and set the fill to light blue color, like this one. And a small disclaimer, I will not create exactly the same animation as Natt created. I mean, not everything will be the same, so not all the colors will match, but I will show you how to create all of the animations from his video. So let's put the anchor point of this ball in the middle by clicking Ctrl, Alt and Home, and then let's align this ball to the middle of the screen by using a shortcut Ctrl and Home. I will rename this layer to ball and put it below the camera. One thing is the camera should always be at the top. Okay, and now to make this ball look like in the original video, we'll have to apply a couple of effects, and the first one will be a preset that I have. It's called Inner Shadow. You can see I have it in presets, and this is what it contains. And don't worry, you don't have to copy all of the effects from there. I will give you this preset in the description of this video, and if you want, you can just go through all of these effects here and see how this preset was created. But the great thing about this preset is that you can control everything only from the Inner Shadow panel. So we'll set the direction to 135. We'll keep the distance at 5 and we'll set the softness to 30. And now we have an inner shadow. And now you might ask why I just don't use the layer style. Right there you can select inner shadow, and this is because if you use layer styles, the 3D animations don't work as they should. Let's actually make this ball a little smaller. So maybe 85. Okay, and after applying this preset, we'll add a glow to this. So I will be using Deep Glow, but if you don't have the Deep Glow because it is a paid plugin, you can just use a normal glow from After Effects. And we'll apply 2 Deep Glow effects. But the first Deep Glow effect, we want to put it above the composite original. Also, I forgot one thing. In the inner shadow, we have to change the shadow color from black to dark blue color. Like this one, let's say. You can see already it looks much better, it has much more texture. Go to the glow and set the radius to 500 and exposure to 2.5 or maybe 2.2, let's say. Yeah, it looks cool, maybe set it to 2 and change the color a little, make it a little lighter, like that. So the first glow was applied before the composite original effect, and the second glow will be applied after that. And on the second glow, set the radius to 150 and the exposure to 0.4. This second glow gives us the actual glow effect that we want around the circle. The first glow just gives us an effect of more texture. I will actually decrease the exposure to 0.3 and increase the radius to 200. Yeah, now it's a little better, I think. Okay, so the ball is ready and now we'll create the jar. But I already did the job and created the jar in Illustrator, as you can see. So now I will import it. When importing this jar, make sure to set the import kind to composition and footage dimensions to document size and hit OK. OK. And of course you will have this jar in the asset folder. So right now go inside this composition and let's copy all of the layers that are here and paste them in the main composition. Put them above the ball but below the camera. And now we can delete the jar composition and just move it down. Increase the scale to something like 300 and position it so that it's in the middle. Now make sure to check this box on the Adobe Illustrator layers, because this will make it so that when you zoom in it doesn't get pixelated. Okay, and I created this jar with 4 layers. 2 layers that represent the cup and 2 layers that represent the jar body. As you can see, I just made separate layers for the stroke and the fill. So the first thing that you want to do after importing this jar is to parent link this layer to this layer and also this one here. And we do that because now when we move the jar main no fill layer, the fill layer moves with it. And basically I separated the stroke from the fill because now we'll want to apply the gradient to the fill, but we don't want to apply this gradient to the stroke. Let's make the original video visible and let's see how this jar looks. So it doesn't even have the stroke, but I created the jar with a stroke, so I will have stroke. And the colors are light blue at the left side and darker blue at the right side. So to get this look, we'll apply the gradient ramp effect. Now set the white anchor point here and the black anchor point kinda here and change the colors there. So the first color should be light blue and the second color will be darker blue. I think maybe even darker, and this one a little more blue, like that. Okay, now just copy this effect to the jar cup, and now we'll also apply the glow to these layers. So search for deep glow or just use a normal glow from After Effects. And I think these settings are pretty good, so radius 250 and exposure 0.4. Now copy this effect and paste it on the second layer. Of course, don't paste it on the stroke layer. Okay, I will actually change the positions of the gradient a little. So this one here, like that, I think it's good. And now the gradient on the cup. Okay, as you can see, I also made the jar bigger and put it in the middle of the screen. And you simply do that by selecting the 2 layers that control the whole jar and clicking S to open the scale, and then you can modify the scale. And now we can start creating the first animation. So really, to create the first animation, we only have to animate the jar position. We have to animate it coming from below the screen. But before doing that, we have to adjust the anchor point of the cup of the jar. So go to jar cup no fill, so the one that controls the jar cup. Go to pan behind tool and put this anchor point here, I would say. Now we can test that by changing the rotation on this layer. And as you can see, it's working. One more thing, as you can see here, it doesn't look good, so we can actually put the jar cup no fill layer behind the jar main layer. This way it looks good. Okay, and at the start this jar should be open, so it looks good. Select the 2 layers that control the whole jar, because the other 2 layers are parented to these layers. Open the position on them and keyframe it at the start, go like 20 frames later. And keyframe it here. And at the second set of keyframes, it's already in the right position. Maybe I will put it a little lower. But on the first set, we have to put it so it's not visible on the screen. So put it down like that. Let's see. Okay, it looks good, but now the ball is not visible. And we'll adjust that by changing the opacity of the fill of the jar. So click on jar main and click T and decrease the opacity to, let's say, 50. And now also decrease the opacity on jar cup layer. So also set it to 50. Okay, but now this ball is not in the right place, but our jar is already in the right place. So we have to animate the ball a little. So open the position on this one. Let's keyframe it at the start, and at the second set of keyframes of the jar, keyframe it again. And let's put it a little lower like that. Let's see. Yeah, I think it looks good. So now, after the ball is inside, so right there, we can start animating the rotation of the cup. So go to jar cup no fill, open the rotation here, keyframe it at this moment and go like 10 frames ahead, keyframe it here and set the rotation to 0. And this way it's closed. Okay, now when I look at the original layer, there is one more thing, and it's that when the ball is inside of this jar, it's also blurred. So in order to get this blur effect, what we can do is create a new mask. So select the pen tool, and this mask actually doesn't have to be perfect. It can just look something like this. Actually, at this point, it has to be perfect because this is the point when the ball is entering the jar. So for now, let's set it to something like this. And on the newly created shape layer, check this box. And this will make it so that this layer is an adjustment layer. Put it above the ball but behind everything else. And now put an effect Gaussian blur on this layer. and set the blurriness to 75, let's say. And we'll just animate the position on this one. So at this moment, it's 1 frame before entering the jar. So open the position, keyframe it here, go 1 frame after that, and at the second keyframe move it so that it's here. Also right now I see that my Gaussian blur is at 0, so put it at 50, and you can already see that it's getting blurred. Let's go 1 frame after that, and again put it here, 1 frame after that. And at this moment, as you can see, you don't even have to really pay attention where it is. You just have to make sure that the ball is inside of this shape. Let's call this layer blur, go 1 frame after that. Yeah, and you can see it's working perfectly. Yeah, the ball is getting blurred. Actually, I will set the start of this layer to this point. Okay, and now like, let's say 1 second approximately after the ball is in the jar, we'll start creating next animation. So this will be the ball exiting the jar. So again, mainly what we'll animate here is the jar, but also we'll have to move the ball a little. So select 2 layers that control the jar and also the ball layer. Click P to open the position, keyframe the position there. Go like 20 frames ahead, keyframe the position again, and now select only the 2 layers that control the jar and move it down like that. And now when it comes to the ball, we want to center it. So with the ball, we can actually just go back to the starting position. So select the first keyframe and paste it here. Now it's in the starting position. And also there are obviously 2 more things to animate, and this is the blur and the jar getting opened. So at the first set of keyframes, let's open the blur, keyframe the position here. Let's see when the ball is out of the jar. 1 frame before this moment, keyframe the position, and here we'll actually change the position so that it's right there. Now 1 frame later and change the position of the blur mask. So it's here. 1 frame after that, it's here. And now essentially at this moment we don't even need the blur layer anymore. So I will cut it here and delete it. Okay, and the last thing is to animate the jar cap. So go to the jar cap no fill, and in this moment let's start opening that. Go like here and let's set it to 108, let's say. Let's see how it looks. It's kinda a little too fast, so I will put the first keyframe earlier and maybe put the second keyframe later. Let's see. Now let's check every frame to see if it looks good. So right here, we don't want the ball to touch the cap. I think here it might be a little too close, so let's move this keyframe 2 frames closer and let's see right now. Yeah, it's good, but you can see that right now we have to actually put the whole jar a little lower because the cap is visible. So go to the second set of keyframes and move it lower like that. Let's see this animation right now. Okay, you can see that this animation happens too fast because we want this ball to actually sit in this jar for a little. So select all of these keyframes that we just created and move them a little later. Let's see right now. Okay, it looks good. Okay, so one thing that I see is that because of the changes, now the blur doesn't look perfect and we have to change the position of that. Okay, and we can trim it here. I think I will start animating the cap a little earlier. I mean when the ball is entering the jar. So I will start closing it right now. So move this keyframe here. And also let's move the second keyframe a little earlier so that it's faster. Okay, so the first part of this whole video is finished. And now I will make some small adjustments and I will get back to you when I finish that. Okay, I'm back, and the only thing that I really changed is I added blur to the whole jar. So I will show you. On the stroke of the body of the jar, I added the Gaussian blur with blurriness set at 10. On the jar main, so the fill of the body of the jar, I added the blur at 80. On this layer, so the stroke of the cap, I added the blur at 6. And on the fill of the cap, I added the blur at 50. This is because I think when you look in the original video, this jar is kind of blurred. Now we can move to the second animation of this video. So this ball getting split into 3 balls. I will mark the point when it starts, so Shift+4. And one more thing that we didn't do throughout this whole animation, but we can actually do that, is put all of the layers in 3D. Because this will not change anything, but later we'll have to put the ball in 3D anyway. You can see the animation looks the same. Hello, it's me from the future. And actually don't listen to this guy, don't put your layers in 3D right now, because this will just make your video render much slower right now. And later in the tutorial I also noticed that, and I disabled the 3D on the layers that don't need the 3D. Okay, so to split this ball into 3, we have to duplicate this layer 2 times. Let's cut the start of the 2 duplicates here. because these balls will only start appearing after this moment. And at the start we'll keyframe the opacity on them and set it to 0 on the first keyframes, and then move like 15 frames ahead, put the second opacity keyframes here and set it to 100. And also in the same moments we want to put the position keyframes. So open the position. We can remove the previous position keyframes, we don't need them. Keyframe the position here, now click U to show you the keyframes and put the second position keyframes here. So align them with the opacity keyframes. Now let's call this first ball R. So it will mean that this ball will be on the right, and let's call this one ball L, and now change the position of them. Like that. Or actually not like that, because I see it's not aligned well. Let's move it closer. The ball right a little to the right, a little more to the right. And let's see how the animation looks. One more thing, going back to the first animation, I think what we can do is decrease the opacity on the stroke of this jar. So here set the opacity, let's say to 75, and here let's set the opacity also to 75. Now I think it will just look a little better. Okay, and during this second animation, the other thing that is happening is that numbers appear inside of these balls. And one thing is that actually right after this ball is in its final position, so right there, this new animation starts. So we have to move these two ball layers right there, or maybe give it one more frame. So let's see right now. Okay, and now we want to create the numbers. So right click here, go to new text and just type 1 here. The font that I'm using, and I think it's pretty similar, is Alliance number 2 and the version is bold, and you will have this font in the asset folder in the description. Let's center the anchor point by using Ctrl Alt and Home shortcut and try to position this number in the center of this ball. Now duplicate the text layer, move them behind the camera and put them in 3D. Move the second number here and type 2 here and move this one here. And of course change it to 3. Now cut all of these text layers in this point, so at the start of this animation, so actually here. Delete the previous parts and let's put these 3 layers right above the 2 duplicate ball layers. It just makes it easier for me to see what is happening in the timeline. Now on all of them open the opacity and basically keyframe it in the same places as the ball layers and also the same values. So at the second set of keyframes it should be at 100% and at the first it should be at 0. And now with your playhead on the second set of keyframes, so where we created these numbers, we want to parent link the number 3 to the ball right. And again with this playhead in this moment, we want to parent link the number 1 to the ball left. This way the numbers are moving with the balls. Yeah, and this looks perfect. So now let's solo the original layer again and let's see what is happening here. It's getting split to 3 ball layers. And then it's moving to form this triangle. So we can do that. Let's unsolo the original layer. But one more thing is that we want drop shadow on these numbers. So select the first number and apply drop shadow here. And let's change the distance to 7 and the softness to 5. Actually the softness to 3. You can see it looks much better and more like in the original video. So let's copy this drop shadow effect and paste it to 2 other number layers. And now it looks great. Go a couple frames later. As I said, I will not really be paying attention to the timing of this animation. And now number layers are parented to the balls. One more thing, this layer, so the number 2 should also be parented to the main ball. So now we have to only animate the positions on the balls. So open it here. Let's keyframe it in this moment. Go like 15 frames after that. Keyframe it again. Number 2 should be on the left side. Number 1 should be up and number 3 should be on the right. So let's position them like that. So, okay, I finished adjusting the balls and I think it looks pretty good. So now what we can do to make it look more like in the original video, I think we have to select all of these position keyframes, click F9 and create a slide is in animation. So select this set of keyframes and move this handle like that. Let's see. Okay, it looks good, but as you can see in my case, because of the positioning, ball number 1 and ball number 2 almost touch during this animation. So what we can do is change the path that the ball number 1 has to travel, because right now it's linear, as you can see. But if we go to the pen tool and select convert vertex tool and now click on this point. We can actually drag the handle so that it changes the path of this ball, the path that this ball has to travel. Let's see. Yeah, now it looks much better because these balls are further away from each other, you can see. And basically right after these balls are in the correct positions, the line starts getting drawn that creates the triangle between them. So let's go like, I don't know, 4 frames after that. And let's start creating this line. So in order to do that, just click G to select the pen tool, but we just used convert vertex tool, so we have to change that to normal pen tool and create a triangle using this pen tool, like this one. Let's put it in 3D. Let's call this layer triangle. Of course, put it below the camera and also put it below the balls. Cut it so that it starts at this moment, not earlier. Now set this stroke to white color and remove the fill. And I would say set this stroke width to 15 pixels. It looks pretty good. Let's see in the original video how it looks by soloing this layer. Okay, as you can see, this line is animated, but it's also really blurred and kind of dark. And obviously, of course, the text trifactor appears. So as you can see, trifactor starts appearing when these balls are moving, so before the lines. So yeah, let's do that. In order to get this look on this triangle, we will decrease the opacity on that to, let's say, 70. And now we'll also apply an effect called Gaussian blur and set the blurriness to, let's try 20 right now. Okay, it's too strong. Let's try 13. Yeah, I think it's good. Maybe even decrease the opacity to 60. And right now we can start animating this triangle. So go to the drop down of the triangle, go to add and add a trim paths. And at the start, keyframe the end, go like 10 frames after that, or maybe like 13 or 12, keyframe it here. And at the first keyframe, set it to 0. As you can see, when we change that, it's animating in the wrong direction because it will start from 1, go to 2 and then 3 and then back to 1. But we want it to go from 1 to 3 to 2 and to 1. So in order to get this look, we actually have to animate the start and not the end. So remove these keyframes and keyframe the start, go 12 frames later. Keyframe the start again. On the first keyframe, set it to 100, and now as you can see, it's animated in the right direction. So now we can add the text trifactor, and this text will start appearing kinda here. So right there, right click, go to new text and type tri-factor. Put this layer below the ball layers and cut it in this moment like that. Now put the anchor point in the middle by using a shortcut Ctrl Alt and Home. And now put it in the middle by using a shortcut Ctrl and Home. The font that I'm using is still Alliance number 2, but let's actually change the version to regular or maybe medium. Yeah, medium is good. And another thing that we have to do is we have to put a drop shadow on that before animating that. So let's go to the number layer, for example 2, copy the drop shadow from there and paste it on this layer. And let's see how it looks. Use the align panel to align it to the center. And this drop shadow on this layer is way too subtle. We have to increase the distance to, let's say, 10. Yeah, now it's a little better, maybe 12. Okay, it's good. And let's set the softness to 5. Yeah, I think it looks really good. So now we have to just start animating the position of that and the opacity of that. The animation is really easy because you just open the position and opacity, keyframe it here, go 10 frames after that, keyframe it again. At the second set of keyframes, it's already done. And at the first set of keyframes, we have to set the opacity to 0 and put this text a little lower. And let's see how it looks. Yeah, perfect. So this part of the video is also done. Now we can move to the next part. Let's see in the original video. So these 3 balls just move to the left. These 3 lines appear on the screen just by opacity keyframes. And these 3 balls are rotating. And this rotation of these balls is probably the most interesting animation of this whole video. So I will show you how to do that. And also one small detail that is happening here is that the whole screen is moving to the left, as you can see, just slightly. So after our animation is done, so our triangle is created, we can actually wait like even 40 frames, and after this 40 frames start creating this next animation, or maybe 30 frames actually. So let's open the position parameter on the ball, keyframe it in this moment. And as you can see, our upper ball moves between these keyframes even though the values on them are the same. This sometimes happens because the path that the ball has to travel gets distorted when creating the second keyframe. So even though the values are the same on the keyframes, the position changes between the keyframes. And to fix that, you have to select the handle of the final point and move it so that it is almost not visible. So try to place the point of that handle in the place of the final position of the ball, so that basically this handle disappears completely. Now let's see. And now you can see it's not moving. So we can get back to our animation. So after this set of keyframes, let's go 20 frames ahead and keyframe the position again. And now just position all of the balls in the right place. Let's see in the original animation. So as you can see, the number 1 travels a little up and to the left, number 2 travels almost only upwards, and number 3 travels at a slight angle downwards. So let's replicate that. Put the number 1 here and also a little up. Put the number 2 a little to the left and up. And make sure that the X position is the same on this too. So let's copy this value and paste it here. And number 3 travels to the right and down. And actually the X position is correct. Make sure that the gaps between them are kinda the same. So I would say I have to put the number 3 a little lower, like that is pretty good. Okay, so this is how it looks. Yeah, and I think it's good. Now we can just start removing the trifactor text and the triangle. So as you can see, the triangle is disappearing by the animation. So again, trim paths animation, but this time in the other direction. And the trifactor text is disappearing by lowering its opacity and also adding a blur. And also it's a really small detail, but you can see that the screen starts moving to the left even before the next frame is created. So you can see that this text trifactor is also moving to the left, and the triangle also is moving to the left, almost right at the end of them disappearing. So let's say like when it looks kind of like this, the screen should start moving to the left. Let's go to my animation. So I think right there our screen should start moving to the left. So create a new null object. For now we'll not use it because firstly we want to get rid of this text and this triangle, but let's create this null because we'll use it in a moment. So trim this start to this point and we can put it somewhere here like that. One more thing that I can do, because it's kind of confusing, I can get rid of all of the jar layers, so just trim the end of these layers here, because now it will be just much more clear to look at the timeline. Okay, so in this moment we'll start with the trifactor. So keyframe the opacity here, and at the second set of keyframes, keyframe the opacity again and set it to 0. And also to add blurriness to this animation, we'll add an effect Gaussian blur. Keyframe the blurriness at the first set of keyframes and keyframe it at the second set of keyframes and set it to, let's try 80 for now. Yeah, it's pretty good, but let's disable the repeat edge pixels. This way, as you can see, it's not limited to this field. And now let's animate the triangle. So keyframe the start again here, go to second set of keyframes, keyframe the start here, and at the second set of keyframes set the start to 100%. It's basically animating in the other direction than the first animation. Yeah, and right in this moment I would say we have to start moving the screen to the left. So connect everything that you see right now on the screen to this null object. And of course put this null object in 3D. So the 3 balls, the trifactor text and the triangle, connect all of that to the null, because the numbers are connected to the balls. So when you connect the balls to the null, the numbers will also move with it. Open the position keyframe on that, go like here. This move to the left is really subtle, so we have to make it very slow. So go much later and keyframe the position here and move it so that it's kinda here. Let's see how it looks right now. Yeah, it's very subtle in our case. Maybe let's move it a little closer, the second keyframe. And maybe we can even start like 2 frames earlier. Yeah, now it looks good, so we can start creating the 3 lines here. So the first line I think should start appearing kinda in the same moment when the start of the null is. So right there. Let's go at the end and see what should be the final position of this line. Go to pen tool and draw a line like that. Actually, it should be longer. Let's cut it in the same place as the start of the null and delete the first part of that. And its final position should be here, like that. So it cannot start appearing right there, it should start appearing a little later. Let's say in my case it would be here. So cut it to this point, and also we'll animate the position on that. So open the position, keyframe it here, and go to the moment when the animation is finished and keyframe it here. And at the first keyframe, set it a little to the right, so it's just looking good. And also a little lower, I would say. Yeah, now it looks pretty good. It's not exactly like in the original animation, but I think it looks good. So of course also parent link this layer to the null, and let's put it below the null and also put it in 3D. Okay, actually I think I will not put these layers in 3D because it's not changing anything and it's just making the whole composition more laggy. So let's only keep the layers that should be in 3D. So the number layers and the ball layers. And the line obviously appears on the screen by opacity keyframes. So keyframe the opacity here, go 10 frames later, keyframe the opacity again, and at the first keyframe set it to 0. Now duplicate this layer 2 more times and change the position of these two lines so that they are next to the balls, like that, but also delete the previous position keyframes. Now as you can see, the opacity keyframes are already there, so we just have to sequence all of these 3 layers. So select all of them, and using a free plugin, Motion Tools, I will give you the link to that in the description. You can just sequence the layers automatically, and here you can change the amount of the frames that you want to sequence them by. So let's say in my case it will be 5, and click this, and now as you can see they are sequenced. I think it could take a little longer for them to get fully visible. So let's move the second opacity keyframes further away, here also, and here also, and we can even sequence them more. And we can also delete the position keyframes on them. Okay, it's good. Let's actually also change the position on them so they are more to the right, like that. Yeah, now it's good, but I think they should be kind of more in the middle. So I think this null object is moving too much to the left. So let's adjust it at the second keyframe, put it here. So it's just a really subtle move to the left. So now let's add a deep glow to the lines. And if you don't have the deep glow, then just use a standard glow from After Effects. And I will set it to, let's say, 250. And exposure to 0.3, even 0.15. And now let's copy this deep glow and paste it here. Okay, and now as you can see, even before the third line is fully animated, is fully visible on the screen, the first point starts getting rotated. So let's go to our animation and let's see. So somewhere here I will start rotating the first ball. So let's mark this point. So in this moment, at this mark, we want to cut all of the balls and the numbers on them, move these layers up, like that. Of course they should be in 3D, and what we want to do is add a new effect to this ball, and this effect is called bulge. Add this effect and put this effect here. Change the radius. And now you have to position this effect kinda so that the viewer cannot see that something is changing. As you can see right now, when I move through these frames, you can see that the inner shadow is kinda changing. It's getting a little smaller and the bright blue fill is getting a little bigger. So go to the bulge effect and move it like that. Yeah, now the viewer will not be able to spot that something is happening. And on the bulge effect, change the bulge height to 0.6. And now we must also start using 2 views, because we want to be able to see what is happening from the top. And now I also see that I actually made a little mistake, but it's easy to fix. So when these 2 new balls starts appearing right there, we actually want the numbers to be adjusted in 3D space even right now, so it doesn't look weird during this transition. So go to 2 views and adjust the position of the numbers, put them closer to the viewer. Let's say Z position at 28, like that, and move all of them to 28. Now you can see in 3D space these numbers are closer to the viewer. And this is the difference. You can see these numbers are jumping a little because now we have to put these 3 new number layers closer to the viewer. So open the position on them and set the Z to 28, actually to -28. And something is not right. Okay, you can see that the Z position is actually -32.9 on this 3, although when I was looking here it was 28. So let's adjust it so it's -28 on these layers. Okay, and now during the change you cannot spot any difference. So now we have to create the check mark and also put it in 3D space. So go to pen tool and draw something like this. Let's put it just above the numbers. Trim the start of it here. Let's make it wider, I would say, so maybe 18, stroke on 18. And change it a little so it looks better. Yeah, this is good. And now put this layer in 3D, put the anchor point on that in the middle of this shape, so click Ctrl, Alt and Home, and adjust the Z position so that it's 28 this time. And now as you can see, the viewer is not able to see it because it's behind the ball. Now duplicate this layer 2 more times and adjust the Y position to put it behind every ball. And also copy the drop shadow effect from the numbers and paste it on these 3 check marks. I will also rename these layers. Okay, and we can start rotating these layers right now. So we have to connect these check marks to the corresponding ball layers. So this one here, middle one to this one, and this one here. Select all 3 ball layers and open the rotation panel and keyframe the Y rotation on all of them. Let's go like 7 frames ahead and keyframe the Y rotation here. And let's try with the first ball layer. So not in this direction, move it in this direction, and you can see it's working. So it should be at -180. I think. But also another thing that you can see is that this check is not correct, it's flipped. So we have to change that on all of the check marks. So right click on that, go to transform and flip it horizontally. Maybe we can actually change the position of them so that they are kinda more in the middle. And as you can see, because of all of the effects that we applied, we get this kinda fake 3D look. And I can show you just how much this bulge effect gives us. So this is with the bulge effect and this is without it. It just gives this animation much more volume and makes it look much more 3D. So now apply the same bulge effect to all of the balls and rotate them. So this is how it looks in my case. Of course I have to stagger it because right now everything is happening at the same time. So now I will move these keyframes later. So on the second one, put it right there, and on the third one, put it here. Let's see. Make this animation a little longer, so like that. Okay, and that's it. So this is the secret of creating this fake 3D rotation. And now the very last animation of this video is this one. So just create the second frame that looks exactly like this, blur out the previous one, and this one has to come on the screen from behind the camera kinda. And obviously it's still rotating, so let's get to that. And now since we already created this frame, it will be really easy because we can just duplicate that. So let's see when the rotation animation is finished. So it's finished here. Let's go a couple frames after that. Let's say right there, mark this point. And here the new screen will start appearing in front of the camera. So the easiest way to create this last animation is to select all of these layers, Ctrl+C, go to the project, click on this icon and create a new composition. Let's call it Goals Duplicate. The composition should obviously be in vertical format. Hit OK. Paste all of these layers here and move all of them so that they are visible on the screen, like that. Yeah, and rotation is there as you can see. Okay, and now go to the main composition and from the project panel select the goals composition, put it below the null, trim the start of it to this point, but also this shadow of it to this point, and this way it starts exactly in this moment, before that it's not visible. Put it in 3D of course. Now go right here to enable two views, open the position on this composition, keyframe it here, go like 20 frames later, keyframe it again and put this layer in 3D, and right now move it closer to the viewer and move it behind the camera like that. So the new composition is animated, but we still have to get rid of all of the layers that we used previously. But also one more thing is that the rotation is happening too quickly on this composition, so just go here, go to the ball, open the keyframes on the balls and move all of these keyframes later. Like here, let's say, and let's go to the main composition. Let's see how it looks right now when this starts rotating. Yeah, even a little too late, I would say. Go here and actually move these keyframes there. Let's see right now. Yeah, now it's good. As you can see, it's not perfectly in the same position because it's not connected to this null, and this null is still moving a little. But we don't have to connect this to the null. We can just open the position keyframes and on the second keyframe move this composition a little to the left, like that. And now we just have to get rid of all of the layers that are here. So the easiest way to do that will be to use a null object that we have here, because all of these layers are anyway connected to this null right now. So let's actually move this keyframe here, because right there we'll start a new movement. Open the scale also, and at the keyframe when this goals duplicate composition is in its final position, we'll set the second set of keyframe here and obviously make it smaller. I would say like 40 is okay. And also let's move it a little to the right, like that. Let's see in the original animation how it looks, how Natt got rid of that. Yeah, I think I should put the second ball and the second line a little lower. So let's go to the null and put it lower. And actually don't put it to the right that much. Put it like that. I think this is okay. And obviously we have to blur everything. So the hard way of blurring everything is to apply blur to all of these layers, but there is easy way to do that. Let's put the null object below the duplicate composition. And I think the easiest way to do that is to create a new adjustment layer. Trim the start of this adjustment layer here, put it below the null, and apply an effect Gaussian blur to this adjustment layer. Keyframe the blurriness here, and at the second set of keyframes here, keyframe the blurriness again and set it to 50. Now as you can see, this adjustment layer is blurring out everything that is below it, and basically everything that is below it is everything that we want to blur. And I think blurriness at 50 is good, maybe 55. Let's also trim the trifactor text and the triangle text. This is only for the sake of the timeline looking better because it's not visible in this moment anyway. Okay, and really the last thing that is happening in this animation is that these three balls again unite to the one ball, and then they move to the middle, and then it is created so that it loops. So at the end it's in the middle, and at the start it should be exactly in the same position, so that this whole animation is basically looping. But I will not show you this last animation because it's really easy, and I already showed you everything that you need to know to create this animation, because everything that is happening here is basically position animation and opacity animation on the upper line and upper ball, and lower line and lower ball, and then opacity animation on the middle line, and at the end this ball is moving to the middle. But there is one thing that I want to adjust and I want to show you, and it's that when the duplicate composition starts appearing on the screen, you can see that there is this very bright moment on the screen, and it is because of the glow. So we can go inside of this composition and we can just animate the glow on the lines so that the entrance of this composition will be much smoother and just better looking. So at the start, keyframe the radius and exposure on all of these lines. The radius and exposure on the deep glow plugin, of course, or the normal glow if you don't use deep glow. Go 10 frames after that and keyframe it again. And at the second set of keyframes, it already has the values that we want. But at the first set of keyframes, let's decrease the radius to maybe 100 and decrease the exposure to 0.03. This way, basically at the start it's barely visible, the glow is barely visible, and it's just growing, it's getting stronger. Okay, and as you can see, I think this glow is still too strong. So maybe at the start we should actually even disable the glow completely. So set the glow to 0, of course the glow exposure to 0. Let's see. Okay, it's still visible, but I think it is because the entrance of this composition is here. So we have to move these keyframes to this point. Yeah, and right now there is no glow at all in this moment. This is just how it looks. Yeah, and this animation looks really cool. So the animation is finished. And if you want to learn more popular styles of editing like Iman Gadzhi, Ali Abdaal, Danko or Vox, then make sure to join our Leverage Editor program and community, where we even recently posted a job offer. So not only you can learn how to edit on the highest level, you can also land a job as an editor there. Link to that is in the description. And with that, thank you very much for watching and see you in the next video.